a very different community and a very different wider societal dynamics. Question answers and comments.
Thank you, Yusuf, for your most informative presentation, and we hope all the attendees were able to appreciate what Yusuf was saying. The recording of this presentation would be posted on Ethica's website shortly, along with the transcript and the audio. And we'll inform everyone who registered for the webinar as soon as we make the recording available. It's time now for your questions and answers. We have about 20 minutes to answer your questions. So please, if you can be kind enough to type your questions, very brief questions, in the chat window, and we can then answer them one by one.
We're waiting for questions. So I think Fahim Akhtar has asked a question. I'm going to try and make sure I understand the question correctly. If I haven't, then hopefully Fahim could clarify. He says that, my question is that despite acceptance of significance of Islamic economy, why are we failing in communities or in communicating our people the importance? I think I'm going to try and keep my answers short just so that we can answer as many questions. I think this is the reality of ideals and knowing something is true and being able to act upon it. I mean, there's a different social dynamic that's brought about, by an Islamic economy, and that at times can involve a struggle. It involves a struggle because the dominant paradigm does not support it. So most of us, when we think about these things, we relegate our needs. We look at it, well, I need to send my children, I need to do this to school, I need to be able to afford this house, I need to afford this car, and we're not willing to take that principle. And that's why I think principles need to be brought to the front, and the understanding that ultimately embedded in Islamic finance, that happiness is not denoted by material possession. Okay, there was a couple of other questions I think that were sent before, and they're actually from, I think, okay, just see some of these questions. Faiza asks a question. In Islam, the reward of our actions are based on our intentions. What is your opinion on products that are Sharia compliant on paper by making it look like a trade when in reality it has no real intentions nor an actual basis of an actual trade, the final outcome resembling conventional banking in many aspects? I think if you look at the Sharia process, we have to understand that this, the dynamic of intention, many scholars said that because it is not visible, that they said that your ruling is relegated to what is outwardly manifest, and it's not the role of the jurist to go beyond the intention. However, this idea is actually, if you look at the bulk of the Sharia jurist, his idea is to look at intention and is to look at context. Because as evidenced by the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, different people would come to him and ask him the same question, and he would often have different responses by being aware of the state of the questioner and by the context in which he was asking. So this is an affirmation of the role of interest in the role of the mufti. Now, if you ask me my opinion on products that are Sharia compliant on paper but making it look like a trade when in reality it has no real intentions or nor any basis of actual trade, I think there is a point there in the sense that what's happening is that the reason why a lot of the Islamic finance industry has gone down its route is because if you go back to the four dynamics of change, are people at the level really willing to accept a true Islamic finance? A true Islamic finance would be on a much smaller scale than what it has been done. As for those scholars who have been saying it's Sharia compliant, this is their responsibility. They've taken on that responsibility, and so at the level of you and me, our trust is they've taken on that responsibility. But the idea is to also know that even if a scholar says the intention is not known and therefore this becomes halal, the real ruling of that product, if you look at it in terms of the maxim, is that you may know your intention. If deep down your intention is to simulate an interest-based loan, then that may be what you're held accountable for. Another question. Is having a noble intention the same as the Machiavellian principle end justifies needs? As per my understanding, not only intentions but modus operandi should be pure ethical. Yes, that's correct. That's exactly the case. Aman Raja posed that question. That's exactly the. I think nowadays the end justifies the means is exactly the opposite to the Islamic paradigm, which is that means are what take precedence, right? And because means are what you're accountable for, the ends are in the role of God. And so what comes about as a result, so this is why my point being that many people may dismiss much of what we've raised in this presentation by saying it's not practical, but means taken along these lines, if you're taking steps in the wrong direction and you fall, that's a learning curve. But if you're taking steps, if you're taking steps in the right direction and you fall, it's a learning curve, and so repeated failure leads to success. But if you're taking steps in the wrong direction, all of your progress is of non-significance. And this is the danger we have, that our progress in Islamic finance is in the wrong direction. Please define more detail of what a cash waqf is and how to differ from normal waqf. Well, this is a...
For such technical questions like the one which Omar Awaz has posted, please define moral details of what a cash waqf is and how did it differ from a normal waqf. I'm afraid we won't be able to cover such technical questions in great detail, but we will post the recording of this webinar, its transcript and the Q&As. The whole presentation will be posted in its entirety on ethicainstitute.com, and everyone will be notified. We'll also create an avenue where such detailed discussions and follow-up questions and consolidation of ideas can take place on Ethica's website, and Yusuf would be able to participate in this. So please forgive us for not being able to ask your questions in great detail, but we will definitely carry this conversation on our website, and Yusuf could probably basically briefly touch on this question.
Just two lines. Traditionally, the idea of waqf did not involve manqulat, things that are movable, because the idea is preservation. You have to preserve the assets. So it was initial controversy with regards to waqf, because cash being used as waqf, because cash can be depleted. And so the sustainability of cash waqf was in question. This debate took place in the Ottoman Empire, where they finally resolved on that they could be, as long as they were responsibly managed by the mutawalli, by the managers of the waqf, the cash waqf could be allowed. But in essence, I mean, when you see the trust model, that's very similar to the cash waqf model. The only distinction being that a trust doesn't have the explicit injunction that it has to be maintained indefinitely, which is what you have in a cash waqf. Where do we buy? Question by Farhatullah Muhammad. It says, from where do we buy dinar and dirham, and how can we use that in Islam, my normal transactions? Well, I gave a reference there, edinar.com. You can buy them from there. And if you go to the Open Trade Network, they have examples and they have people who you can contact as how to engage it with.
Faiza Riaz asks, why would banks agree to help contribute to waqf funds?
Okay, this is the big question, and this is exactly when I raised this with my manager, and he said, why would a commercial bank engage in this? And the reason why they probably wouldn't is because there's no commercialism to it. And that's why the dynamic of change usually involves struggle and usually involves some kind of penalty. And the discourse of the industry would have to engage people who are lobbying the industry in saying that, no, we're not happy with you as a commercial bank not having a cash waqf. We're not happy with you giving your empty rhetoric of how you are living your ideals, but all intents and purposes, you're mirroring a conventional financial institution with all the ramification it entails. The first idea being to know what the ramifications are. Why are commercial financial institutions, not necessarily implying that everyone within them is bad, but as institutions, how they're facilitating a process that is collectively destroying our humanity, collectively. So if this can be brought to the fore, then potentially a Islamic commercial bank, maybe this goes into the tipping point idea. One bank takes the plunge. It says, I want to distinguish myself from other Islamic commercial banks, even if it's a competitive dynamic, by having a local jurisdiction, a presence in the community. And what this does, it legitimizes it. And this is not to say there are some exceptional people that I've come across and morally upright people in the Islamic finance industry, and I think many of them may actually be willing to take this idea forward and as a way of distinguishing it. If this idea is taken forward, IOFI can further institutionalize it by saying this is what we promote. They can propagandize it, they can encourage it, and they can create incentives for it. I.e., if someone doesn't do this, then they're removed from the IOFI membership, or they're downgraded in IOFI membership, and others are given a green mark or a plus or a minus. That basically is so. This way, we have a chart now by which people can ascertain the degree of moral compliance of Islamic finance institutions, which at the moment there is no accountability.
Jan Jacobson from Germany asks, what can I do personally?
I think this goes back to what we were discussing. I mean, the first thing is to read, to avail ourselves of the knowledge, and this is why we have several references in this presentation to understand the issues, and then to actually, many of the changes that we advocated do not need the remit of an institution. There are things that you and me as individuals can do. We have to look at the regulations of the countries and as to how to get ourselves out of riba, such as buying local, making sure that we have abstinence, we're not, we're living within our means, trying to remove as much of debt from our life as we can, being conscious of the environment. I encourage everyone to study the permaculture movement. It's very fascinating. And permaculture is an idea of living within your immediate environment, and also the removal of debt from your life. And I think that movement is very much synonymous for how we as individuals should be engaging with this scenario. So we should be studying this, and we should be doing this. And then at the level of banking and so on, we should be bringing this discourse, trying to encourage this discourse in public, so that Islamic banks, if not willingly, then unwittingly, they're shamed into taking these initiatives. And the reason why I think they should is because this is the collective benefit for all of us.
On a similar note, Janeika Ali says, there is a lack of education amongst Muslims. They're not concerned with the aspect of sustainability, even in the simplest matters such as not wasting and recycling, never mind more complex matters such as finance. Shouldn't we start at the grassroots and then work our way up to finance? What would be the best way to achieve this?
Well, I think we should start at whatever level we're endowed or able to start with. But the real, as alluded to by many environmentalists, even if we start at the grassroots level, which is, maybe recycling our rubbish and so on, many of them say the collective weight that such initiatives will do will be too little in face of the damage or the ultimate damage being brought about by the debt-based financing model. Basically speaking, even if everyone in the world was to start becoming environmentally friendly and we don't change the financial system, it's not going to cause much of a change, because the financial system is directly fueling much of the environmental damage. So a real change would have to be at the level of finance, and there are sincere, committed people. I mean, the sustainable movement involves, the community land trust, community currencies, demurrage currencies. I want all of you to go and look at what demurrage currencies are. The idea that the currency has an embedded negative interest, i.e., if you don't spend it and circulate it in the economy, you will lose value. What does that resonate with? That resonates with zakah. The Islamic institution of zakah literally prevents you from hoarding. It encourages you to invest, encourages you to spend. And so when we look in our tradition, we see our tradition is complete opposite to what this industry is taking us down. So we need to now apply these things.
Another question from Faiza Riaz, who says, how will AOFI regulate the banks around it if it is not considered as an apex body for Islamic finance?
IOFI is not considered apex body, and IOFI doesn't have much jurisdicable power, aside of, I think, from maybe Bahrain. But the idea is not, you don't need to have legislative or jurisdictional power to impact these changes. If you've got sufficient name whereby you're a reference source, and IOFI has that name because the industry leading scholars are on its panel. If you have sufficient name, the power of public perception is enough of a deterrent. So if IOFI is willing, and IOFI does some amazing work, but if IOFI then takes this additional